Welcome back to the Birdhouse Dynasty show, and today we're going to be discussing top landing spots for the 2024 NFL Draft rookie wide receivers. Now, before we get going, please smash the like and subscribe, and don't forget, we're going live this Thursday night for the 2024 NFL Draft. Give you plenty of coverage here. It's going to be exciting. Now, let's get into these top landing spots for our rookie wide receivers. So in order to compile this list, I started off by looking at the quarterback situation of the teams, the offensive coordinators, play calling, basically the number of pass attempts and targets that will be available for these incoming rookies. And I sort of was able to divide it up into a couple of groups. First group would be teams where a rookie wide receiver could come in and establish themselves as the number one wide receiver. And then the second group was where they could come in and be a strong number two wide receiver. All right, so the first group, I've got 5 teams. I want to start it off at the top with the Buffalo Bills. And Josh Allen slinging the rock can't be bad for any rookie wide receiver, especially a first or second round wide receiver. Now, when we're looking back at last season and we had the emergence of Puka Nacua from the 5th round and Tank Dell from the 3rd round, you might ask yourself, Birdman, what are you talking about? We're looking for late round sleepers if we're talking Puka Nacua and Tank Dell. Well, what I want to get into is the fact that Puka and Tank were able to flourish because of the targets that were available to them and because of the offensive systems that they went into. First of all, the Rams had an old wide receiver at the top in Cooper Kupp, and he happened to get hurt. So that opened the door for Puka Nacua to snatch some targets from him. But also, you had to consider the fact that Matt Stafford was throwing the ball, and he had Sean McVay calling the plays. So all of those things in consideration are what brought out the breakout from Puka last season. Not necessarily so much that he was a 5th round pick. He could have been a 2nd rounder, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th rounder, whatever. He was in the right place at the right time. Now, when we look at Tank Dell, well, CJ Stroud went out and told the organization specifically he wanted them to draft him. And they did. And it paid off for them. So those are the types of things that we want to look at when we're trying to find the breakout rookie wide receiver. Also consider the fact that, there are a number of early round, first and second round wide receivers this year that have tons of talent. Now, how are we going to differentiate them? Well, you can't just draft them in order of what they're drafted by the NFL teams. Sometimes you get a Tyquan Thornton in the 2nd round. Well, he didn't pay off because the New England offense was complete garbage last year. Nobody could produce anything fantasy-wise. So we want to get back to this list here and start off with the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills obviously shipped off Stephon Diggs this offseason, opening the door for some targets. Now, they brought in Curtis Samuel, they have Khalil Shakir, and while those guys might be good complementary pieces, they also have Dalton Kincaid, who definitely will continue to see a number of targets. However, the Bills threw the ball 579 times last season. So that means there's plenty of targets to go around. I could see an A.D. Mitchell, I could see even a Javon Baker flourishing if he gets picked in the 3rd or 4th round. So that's what I'm getting at here is it doesn't have to necessarily be a 1st or 2nd round wide receiver going to these teams. It could be a 3rd or 4th round wide receiver. As we know, if you've looked at any of the other podcasts out there who are trying to rank all these rookie wide receivers, honestly, after the big 3 receivers, 4 through 20, could end up any which way by the end of next season. It's all going to come down to opportunity for these guys. They need the opportunity, and then they need the dedication. So we don't know. We aren't in the locker rooms with these guys. We aren't in the film rooms doing study in the wide receiver rooms with these guys. We don't know how well they're meshing with their quarterback in the huddle. All right. All we can go off of right now is talent evaluation from the combine. We can look at film study, which is a little bit more than just watching the highlights from them. So what we need to do here, though, is just take into consideration that the opportunity is there with all of these teams. Number 2, I have New England. Now, you might look at New England as a trash can of a landing spot, but I see opportunity. A couple of years ago, nobody looked at Cincinnati as a good landing spot, right, for receivers. All they had was an incoming rookie named Joe Burrow and another incoming rookie named T. Higgins. And now, a year later, they drafted Jamar Chase. And in today's game, they're one of the hottest offenses in the league. So New England has a lot of opportunity for a young wide receiver to flourish. Now, whether they will or not, that's yet to be determined. But expect a rookie quarterback there for them who's going to try and show what he's got. So he could easily mesh well with a rookie wide receiver, thus giving you plenty of opportunities for targets. At number 3, I've got the LA Chargers. Now, this is an interesting landing spot. So we've got a heavy run game coming into the fold here with Jim Harbaugh bringing in Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. Greg Roman, as you might remember, led the 49ers and Colin Kaepernick, as well as the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So with those type of quarterbacks running the show for the Greg Roman offenses, I'm not sure Justin Herbert is the guy to be running these. I've seen a few rumors out there where Herbert gets traded to New England. I've seen him getting traded to Minnesota. Both would be juicy opportunities for rookie wide receivers. At least New England. I don't know about Minnesota, but Herbert would have plenty of nice weapons there already. Now, in LA, though, if they bring in, say, somehow they figure out to bring in Jaden Daniels or Drake May, I don't see that happening. I actually see J.J. McCarthy landing there then. But the point being, all they have right now is Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston and really nothing at tight end for targets. And so last year they threw the ball 632 times. Now, I definitely don't expect that to happen with a Greg Roman offense. I would say cut that total down by 100. And it still leaves targets out there is the point. And even if it's a slow offense, like, say, Arthur Smith's offense last season, well, they threw the ball 530 times still, and Drake London and Kyle Pitts still saw some targets. Okay, they didn't score 0 on the season. So if a rookie wide receiver goes to LA, whether it's Herbert running the show or some other rookie, they still have plenty of opportunity to snatch some targets out of there. Now, at number 4, I have the New York Giants, who are led by Brian Daboll, who did run a pretty efficient offense in Buffalo with Josh Allen. And they need a number 1 alpha wide receiver. I could see Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze easily landing there at number 6. Those would be great opportunities for Rome or Neighbors. But let's say the Giants decide to go somewhere else and they wait until the 2nd or 3rd round to grab a wide receiver. Even in that case, that 2nd or 3rd round wide receiver would have plenty of opportunity to flourish. They threw the ball only 518 times last season, but that's still 518 targets that are out there. Who do the Giants have right now? Wan'Dale Robinson? Jalen Hyatt? Maybe retiring Darren Waller? Bollinger at tight end? I mean, come on. There is plenty of room for targets there, and I know that Daboll would love to sling the rock more than 518 times this year. At number 5, I've got the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals have Kyler Murray in place, so it's a good, solid quarterback situation. They do have Trey McBride at tight end, who's going to eat up a number of targets himself. But the Cardinals threw it 555 times last season, and Hollywood Brown is gone. DeAndre Hopkins from a couple of years ago is out of there. So there is plenty of opportunity for an alpha to emerge with the Cardinals. Now, many are expecting Marvin Harrison Jr. to land there at number 4. But what if the Cardinals decide to trade that pick because they need talent elsewhere and want multiple picks for that number 4 pick again? They did that last year. Now, a lot of their fan base is angry at that because they lost out on a top flight defensive end that ended up in the Texans' laps with that pick. But if they decide to trade back again, I could see a receiver in the second or third round flourishing. Maybe they trade back in the first round and end up with a Brian Thomas. Any of these guys, a second or third rounder or Brian Thomas, would flourish as a number 1 wide receiver in Arizona. So those are my top 5 landing spots where guys have the opportunity to be a number 1 in the offense right out of the gate. Now let's move on to the ideal number 2 situations. There's 7 teams I have here. Starting off with the New York Jets. Yes, and Aaron Rodgers, who hopefully will be back nice and healthy from his Achilles tendon injury last season. Maybe he'll get more than 4 plays this season in. And if he does, expect them to be throwing the ball. Breece Hall is a great pass catcher out of the backfield. I'm sure if Saleh has his ways, they'll be slamming it up the gut as many times as possible. But keep into consideration, all they really have for receivers right now are Garrett Wilson. So there's plenty of opportunity to be the number 2 there. I could see anywhere from, say, a Ricky Pearsall in the second round, all the way down to maybe a Jacob Cowing as a nice slot guy. He's from Arizona. Watch his film. He's electric. Now, moving on, 7th overall, I would say, but the second option I have for a good number 2 landing spot is the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, of course, this would take a T. Higgins trade to open up this spot for the Bengals. But if they do trade Higgins on draft night, this is an ideal landing spot. Many have Brian Thomas ending up in Cincinnati. Even if it isn't him and they take a receiver in the second round, there would be plenty of opportunity there with Joe Burrow throwing it around the yard. Now, number 3, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Another great situation with a real solid quarterback. Of course, Hollywood Brown signed there this offseason. We don't know yet the status of Rashee Rice. And his off-the-field issues. So it's probably going to be at least a 2 to 6 game suspension is my guess right now. So that is an opportunity for a young wide receiver. Now, I don't know if the Chiefs are going to use a first-round pick like many hope and grab Xavier Worthy and get that speed into the offense. That's what a lot of people out there are prognosticating. I'm not here to do that today. I'm not concerned with who goes where. I'm just talking about what spots have good opportunity. And the Chiefs do have an opportunity possibly for you. At the next spot, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Another great situation. Real solid offense. Dak Prescott slinging it around. Of course, they've got CeeDee Lamb at the number 1. But who is the number 2 in Dallas? Will it just be Brandon Cooks again? Or will they bring in a nice, shiny rookie wide receiver? We shall find out on Thursday or Friday night. Next up, I've got the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Atlanta just brought in Kirk Cousins in the offseason, who was on a rate of the 3rd highest pass attempts in the league last year in Minnesota. So he's bringing that cannon to Atlanta. Expect big fireworks from the Falcons' new offense with the Rams' old quarterbacks coach coming in to call the plays. I expect a lot of pass attempts in Atlanta, boosting the numbers for Drake London, Kyle Pitts and whoever ends up being the number 2 wide receiver. Sure, they brought in Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore, but those are both wide receiver 3 types. So I expect the Falcons to draft somebody in the top 4 rounds of the NFL draft. We'll see who it is, and that guy will get some opportunity to flourish. The next spot, I've got the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints are sitting there with Derek Carr as their quarterback. He can still throw the ball. He may not have been pretty last season, but Chris Olave still put up decent numbers. And of course, he'll be back this season. But just who is the number 2? Rashid Shaheed is a very exciting player, but is he really a bona fide number 2 wide receiver? He would very well flourish as a number 3 wide receiver if they had a solid number 2 guy there. So we'll see who the Saints decide to take. I expect them to take at least 1 wide receiver in this draft. And finally, I wanted to talk about the Carolina Panthers. Panthers are sitting there with Deontay Johnson, their new guy they brought in from Pittsburgh in a deal this offseason. And so, who else will there be? They still have Adam Thielen, sure. There's Jonathan Mingo. There's still Terrace Marshall Jr. Well, none of these other options really paid off. Sure, Adam Thielen got a good amount of targets last season, but it didn't really correlate to wins. Now, I see the Panthers making moves this year. They brought in Dave Canales from Tampa, and he had a great offense that worked last season. We'll see if it does with Bryce Young. I definitely see them adding a wide receiver in the top 4 rounds. That guy is going to have plenty of opportunity to be the strong number 2 opposite Deontay Johnson. All right. So with that said, I also did want to give an honorable mention to another trade that could possibly happen. That would be Brandon Ayuk getting dealt out of San Francisco. That would open the door up for another wide receiver. I can't see the Niners just sticking Juwan Johnson in there as their number 2. They're going to want to have a good solid guy on the outside opposite of Deebo Samuel. So if they do trade Ayuk, expect the Niners to be taking a receiver in the 1st or 2nd round. Also, I wanted to mention the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, and Arthur Smith running the show. Yikes. Well, we do have George Pickens on the outside, but I don't see Pickens as a true alpha number 1 wide receiver that's going to command 8+ targets a game. He flourishes as that number 2. So I could see Pittsburgh drafting a solid route running wide receiver that goes over the middle, makes the tough catches. Any a number of prospects in this year's draft could fit that bill. So I wouldn't doubt Pittsburgh drafting a wide receiver in the rounds 1 through 3, somewhere in that range I could see. And that guy will have plenty of opportunity as well. All right, that should do it for today's show. Again, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe. And don't forget, again, this Thursday night, we're going live in the Birdhouse, starting at 6 p.m. Central Time, running through the NFL Draft. We're going to work Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday, all weekend in the Birdhouse. It's going to be fire.